Tonight, under a violet dusk sky over the domes of old Isfahan, the scent of pomegranate peel and wet wool drifts through the alleyways like a story half remembered. In a narrow courtyard not far from the riverbank, you find yourself standing beneath drying lines of crimson and indigo, where hand-dyed carpets hang like flags of forgotten empires. Their colors bleed slowly in the evening air, dripping pigment into cracked tiles below. And here is where you'll stay, if only for a while. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me, where in the world are you listening from tonight? What time is it there? Now, dim the lights for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. A Persian boy, not quite a man, stands at the edge of a copper basin filled with dark dye, his bare feet damp from hours of splashing, stirring, and praying under his breath. His name is Navid. His hands are stained plum dark. His fingers cracked, and his shoulders ache in that quiet way that only apprentices truly understand. He has one job this evening: to fix the dye that won't stay. It's not the first time this pigment has betrayed him. Every time he washes the dyed yarn, the color washes out like a secret unwilling to stay. His master's voice, measured but heavy, still echoes from earlier that morning. If the red runs again, don't come back without a reason. That kind of threat isn't about punishment, it's about disappointment, which, let's be honest, stings longer. Navid leans over the vat. The water glows with an eerie sheen under the last flickers of daylight, like molten garnet in a bowl too deep to measure. He stirs it again, slowly, left to right, right to left, a rhythm meant to calm the nerves, though it rarely does. Then a stranger speaks behind him. Colors don't cling because they were never yours. He turns. An old man stands at the edge of the courtyard, wrapped in layers of dust-colored robes, the kind that mark a desert wanderer or a monk, or maybe both. His face is sun-lined and unreadable, like a scroll that's been folded too many times. "Excuse me," Navid asks. The man steps closer, unfazed by the steam or the scent of vinegar and crushed walnuts. You're trying to hold something that was made to change. That's why it slips. Navid blinks. His first thought: this man clearly doesn't know anything about dye chemistry. But then again, something in the stillness of the stranger's eyes makes him pause. "You speak in riddles." "Do I?" the monk asks. "Or do you expect the dye to obey when you don't understand its nature?" Navid crosses his arms. Its nature is that it should stay on the wool. That's what dye is for. The monk smiles gently, like a teacher amused by the earnestness of a child. Wool is porous. Dye is temporary. Sunlight fades. Water washes. Is it the fault of the dye, or your misunderstanding of what permanence means? And there it is, that subtle sting, the kind that doesn't wound, but cracks something open. Navid looks down at his stained hands, the colors sinking into the creases of his palms. How many carpets had he helped make? How many had already faded in homes far away? How many had changed even before they were finished? The monk kneels beside the vat. He doesn't touch the water. He only watches it. And something about the way he watches makes the entire courtyard fall silent. Even the pigeons on the rooftop seem to hush themselves. "There's a reason," he says, "that the Buddha taught impermanence before he taught wisdom. If you cling to the outcome, you miss the unfolding. If you mourn every fading, you miss the arising. This failure, is not a punishment. It's a teaching. Navid sits beside him now, without meaning to. The copper vat steams quietly between them. Then what am I supposed to do? He asks, not expecting an answer. But the monk replies, as if he's heard this question 1,000 times before. You observe, you breathe, you stir the vat again, but this time, don't demand permanence. Just notice what appears and what dissolves. It's so simple. And yet, something shifts. Navid stirs the die again. The rhythm feels different now. It no longer feels like control. It feels like listening. The monk rises slowly. I'll see you again, he says, though he gives no name and offers no destination. He turns, his robes trailing quietly behind him, like the breeze before a monsoon. Later that night, the die holds, just enough. Not perfect, but honest. And for the first time, Navid doesn't rush to show his master. Instead, he sits alone in the fading light and watches the steam curl upward like incense. The carpet will still fade one day. The color will soften. But for now, in this moment, it holds, just like breath, just like peace. Traditional Persian carpet, dyeing often relied on plants like madder root and indigo, but their hues were always vulnerable to time. No matter how vibrant, all color eventually bows to sun, wind, and water. And maybe that's why Persian weavers never chased perfection. They just wove the truth of change as the moon rises above Isfahan and the last of the dye cools to stillness. Navid leans back, closes his eyes, and remembers the monk's words not as commands, but as colors. The morning after the dye held, Navid stepped into the workshop differently. Not with pride, no, not quite. It was subtler than that. It was like how a tree might wake after rain, not grand, not loud, just more rooted. The master didn't say much. He examined the dyed yarn, touched it, nodded once, and returned to his ink scrolls without a word. In this place, approval rarely arrived with trumpets. Silence meant well done. But the real lesson wasn't in the yarn. It was in the residue that had stained Navid's mind. That evening, while sweeping the dye dust off the floor, he noticed an old rolled-up carpet wedged beneath a chest. The edge was frayed, the pattern mostly hidden under layers of dust. He tugged it free, and as it unfurled, something strange appeared. It was a pattern he'd never seen. Not a mistake exactly, but definitely unconventional. Vines where lines should be, a blue diamond half swallowed by a red wave. Certain knots seemed out of place, while others curled deliberately around empty space. It looked like two carpets fighting to be one. He carried it to the small inner courtyard and waited for the last of the sun to slip behind the domes. A few minutes later, Masi, one of the weavers, walked past and paused. He was older, always humming, always squinting. Where did you find that Navid gestured to the fraying mess? Buried under the chest? Do you know it? Masi squatted beside him and ran a calloused hand across the fabric. Ah, yes, that was Fatime's. She wove it years ago. What happened to her? Masi shrugged. She left. Said the pattern wasn't working. Said she kept making mistakes. But I told her it wasn't mistakes. It was a different kind of pattern. Just harder to see. Navid frowned. You mean she made it like this? On purpose? No. Masi chuckled. But maybe the carpet did. There was a long pause, As the wind nudged the fringe like a cat's tail, she kept trying to control the outcome. Masi said, but it kept slipping, so she abandoned it. Navid leaned in. But look at it. It's beautiful. Exactly. Masi whispered, that's karma. Boy. Navid blinked. Karma, not punishment, not reward, just the echo of action. The weave under the weave. He tapped a knot that had been looped twice by accident. See this? She meant to fix it, but then it pulled that diamond off center, which bent the next row, which turned that straight line into a curve. And now look at it. A path. Navid stared. For the first time, he wasn't just seeing design, he was seeing consequence. Every mistake was a condition. Every correction became a new cause. And suddenly, the carpet wasn't just fabric. It was a mirror that night. As he returned to his own work, he began to wonder how much of what we call error is actually just the part we haven't understood yet, and how many things in life look like chaos until they're finished. You dye the yarn, you hand it to the weaver, you walk away, and what they make of it is out of your hands. That's karma, not fairness, just unfolding, like the blue that bleeds into red, creating purple where none was planned. Here's a curious truth for you in traditional Persian carpet making. Mistakes were often embraced. Patterns shifted, colors bled. Sometimes, what began as an error became the most memorable feature. Weavers called it the hand of the unseen, a soft nod to the Dharma, even if they didn't call it that. And now, you sit quietly, imagining your own life as a carpet frayed in some corners, tangled in others, but never truly broken, just woven by forces you don't always see. You breathe in, you breathe out. You remember the monk, watching dye steam like incense, and somehow, everything feels softer tonight. By now, the scent of indigo has become part of your breath. Not in the literal sense, don't worry. No dye fumes here, but in the way memory lingers in the nose, even after the source is gone. You've followed Navid through yarn and color and missteps, and now, the world is about to test what he's learned, with gold. It begins, as these things often do, with a stranger at the door. A merchant from the northern provinces arrives, dressed in layers of rose-colored silk and weighted with chains heavy enough to buy a neighborhood. He speaks with that smoothness people develop when they're used to being listened to. I need a carpet, he says to the master, loud enough for every apprentice to hear. That never fades. No dullness, no running. A lifetime of perfect crimson. I'll pay double. Navid, from behind the screen of drying yarn, freezes. He glances toward the vat where his last batch still cools. Unsure whether to laugh or run, the master, bless his ever-stoic face, just bows. We will do our best, but no color holds forever. The merchant smirks. Then perhaps you need to learn how. He leaves behind a sack of coin and a demand a rug dyed with immortality. Of course, immortality's never been part of the workshop's curriculum. That evening, the master calls Navid over and hands him a slip of paper. This is your task. Navid stares at the design. It's ornate, geometric, all curves and flames and flowerings of impossible elegance. But more than the shape, it's the instruction that stings. Crimson that never fades. He almost says, that's not real. But something in his chest stops him. That night, as he preps the dye, he's visited not by the monk this time, but by doubt. And doubt is louder. He mixes the pomegranate rind, crushed madder root, iron filings. He stirs until the air smells like earth and rust. He watches the color bloom, deep and blood-rich. It's beautiful, but it's also temporary. He knows this. Still, he dips the yarn. Still, he prays. But somewhere deep in him, a tiny rebellion starts to unfold. A voice says, maybe if you just change the formula, add more mordant, use heat, push it. And he does. He alters the recipe. He overboils the batch. He pushes the color so deep into the fiber that the yarn comes out stiff. And at first it works. The crimson is brilliant, soaked, bold. Sunlight hits it and recoils. Navid feels invincible. But a week later, the weaver pulls him aside. This yarn doesn't bend. What do you mean it won't tie? It cracks. And sure enough, what held color? Lost movement. The rug's edges are brittle. The weaver's fingers blister from the resistance. The pattern warps because the yarn won't yield. Navid stares at the carpet as it takes form, perfect in hue, but dead in spirit. That night, he doesn't sleep. He walks back to the vats under moonlight, stands beside the water, and stares into the reflection of his own ambition. The lesson arrives slowly. Like light slipping through curtains, you can force things to last. But in doing so, you often kill what made them alive. Impermanence isn't a flaw. It's the condition for movement, for softness, for beauty. Without fading, there is no invitation to witness, no moment of arrival. You remember now the story of Fatime's carpet, the one that seemed like a mistake until it wasn't. And the monk's words, if you mourn every fading, you miss the arising. It turns out that trying to make something permanent is just another form of fear. Here's something to reflect on in Japanese Buddhist aesthetics. There's a term called wabi-sabi, the beauty of things that are imperfect, impermanent, and incomplete. A crack in a tea bowl, the fading of dye in the sun. These are not defects. They are expressions of reality. And so, under a pale dawn sky, Navid begins again. He boils a new batch of dye this time with balance, not ambition. He lets the color settle into the yarn without force. The hue is softer, yes, but the fiber breathes again, it bends, it yields, and when the merchant returns, expecting eternal crimson, the master simply shows him the rug. This one, he says, will age. As you will, but its spirit will remain. The merchant frowns. Navid watches. Then the man nods. And for once, nobody pretends that anything will last forever. Sometimes the most unexpected teachings arrive not in silence or scripture, but in chaos. It happens 2 weeks after the merchant accepts the carpet. The dye shop is unusually full. Orders have increased. There's tension in the air, the kind that makes apprentices walk faster, talk less. Everyone's careful, focused. Even the pigeons have stopped landing on the beams, as if sensing a storm in the dye. Navid is preparing a vat of cochineal. The red glows under sunlight, thick like honey, shimmering with that almost magical potential that only exists before the yarn goes in. Then it happens. A sharp shout, followed by the crash of ceramic, a scuffle, and then a flood. One of the boys, barely 10, has tripped over a jug. The main vat tips. 30 gallons of dye water surge across the courtyard, washing pigment into every corner, staining carpets, tools, sandals, everything. The sound it makes is unforgettable. Like 1,000 unsaid apologies running downhill. Everyone freezes. The boy, trembling, is about to cry, but no one yells. Not yet. Then the weaver rushes in. Not Navid, not the master. The weaver. Her name is Yasmin Small, blunt, always singing off-key. She's in the middle of knotting a large piece commissioned by a temple across the river. The carpet is massive. The dye batch was for her. She sees the mess, and she sinks, not to cry, but to her knees, hands in her lap, eyes wide with the kind of quiet devastation that doesn't need words. Navid kneels beside her, unsure of what to say. The little boy flees. "I'll fix it," Navid murmurs, though he doesn't know how. Yasmin nods, slowly. Then she looks at her hands. The dye has splashed them bright crimson, like henna from a wedding. She holds them up and studies them. "I was going to make the border blue," she says softly. "But maybe this is the new plan." Navid blinks. "You're going to keep it. It already happened." She shrugs. It would be cruel to pretend otherwise. And just like that, the accident becomes design. Over the next few days, Yasmin adapts. The border shifts. A wave of red ripples through the outer ring of the carpet, flowing where it was never meant to flow. She renames the design the Crimson Flood. And it's stunning. Navid watches her work in awe, not because of her skill, which is considerable, but because of her acceptance. The kind that doesn't mean giving up, but giving in, leaning into the change instead of resisting it. The carpet is finished within the week. It looks like no other. The temple receives it in silence. No complaints, just bowed heads and a long moment of reverence. That night, Navid asks Yasmin what gave her the idea to keep going. She shrugs again. The thread didn't argue. So why should I? You consider that. You wonder how many things you've thrown away at the first sign of a mess. How many plans you've canceled when the dye ran in the wrong direction. But what if the mistake was never a mistake? What if it was the only way? Through Persian carpet weavers often wove asymmetry into their work, not out of error, but humility. A subtle curve, a skipped stitch, a nod to the divine imperfection of life. They say only the heavens are flawless. Everything else is process. You breathe, you let your shoulders drop. You remember the dye stain under your feet in that courtyard, the one no one cleaned. It's still there. A reminder that beauty doesn't always arrive on schedule. Sometimes it crashes in, uninvited, red and wild and utterly unrepeatable. And sometimes that's the whole point. By now, the dye shop has become more than just a place of labor. It's a kind of teacher. Each vat holds not just pigment, but patience. Each mistake, an opening. And Navid has begun to see it. Not just with his eyes, but with his breath, his fingertips, the way his mind doesn't flinch so quickly anymore. Which is why the next lesson doesn't arrive with thunder. It arrives with absence. One morning, the apprentices file in, as usual yawning, rubbing their eyes, clutching bits of flatbread still warm from the tandoor. The copper vats are cold. The yarns still hang in bundles, waiting for color. But something is off. The master isn't there. At first, no one panics. He's an old man. Maybe he's late. Maybe he's meditating. Maybe he just needs a break from all the sighing and spilling and questioning. But by noon, the truth settles. He's gone. No note, No farewell. No instructions. Only one thing left behind: a small, empty glass jar, scrubbed clean, set at the center of his table. Navid stares at it for a long time. It gleams in the sunlight. It doesn't say anything, of course, but it feels like it should. He picks it up, turns it over in his hands. There's nothing inside. Not even dust, just air, space. The apprentices whisper. Masih the weaver shakes his head. I told him not to go wandering at his age. He mutters, but he always said when the teaching is done, the teacher leaves. Navid laughs, though it's thin. But was it done? Masih looks at him carefully. For him, maybe. That night, the workshop is quieter than usual. The yarns don't dance in the wind. The fire doesn't crackle quite right. The pigeons don't even bother to scavenge the crumbs. Navid places the empty jar on the windowsill, where the moonlight can pass through it, and he realizes something. This clean, empty jar is the final lesson. Not words, not instructions, just space, like a koan in physical form. What is the shape of what remains after everything is taken? In the days that follow, Navid tries to lead, not command. He's not that foolish. But he listens more. He begins to teach the younger boys how to stir gently, how to watch the pigment bloom, how to recognize when they're trying too hard, and when they ask him what the master would do. He often answers with a smile and a shrug. He lets silence do most of the talking. One evening, one of the boys spills turmeric dye across a finished batch. He gasps, begins to cry. I ruined it. Navid kneels beside him, picks up a strand, studies it. Yellow lines streak through what was once soft green. It looks like sunlight threading through leaves. He says, Did you ruin it? Or did you just invite the sun? The boy stares. Then he smiles. It's a small moment, but it matters. Here's something subtle you might not know. In many Zen monasteries, the master would often leave the room during a disciple's breakthrough moment, not as abandonment, but as acknowledgement you've arrived at the threshold, and I cannot walk you through it. Only space will reveal what's yours to see, like the empty jar, like the rug with the red border, like a teaching that doesn't explain it echoes. You shift in your bed, perhaps listening to your own breath now. You wonder what jars have been left in your life, what silences were actually signposts. And you realize some of the most profound guidance comes without a voice, just a clean jar, catching moonlight, just enough to see that presence doesn't always speak, but it never stops teaching. You're starting to sense it now, aren't you? That this story isn't really about a dye shop, or a teacher, or even a boy becoming a man. It's about what you do when the wind takes what you thought you'd already tied down. Because that's what happens next. It begins with a gift, a commission, to be exact, from a faraway monastery nestled near the edge of the Dashti Kavir Desert, a place of mirages and silence, and a kind of sun that doesn't ask for permission. The request is simple, yet sacred: a prayer rug, not just any rug. One woven with the colors of the early dawn, soft rose, deep indigo, the pale gold of date palms just touched by light. It must be humble but radiant, durable yet soft enough for bowed foreheads. Navid accepts the task with reverence. He prepares the dyes with the kind of care usually reserved for prayers. He boils each root slowly, strains each flower twice. The colors are soft. Yes, but honest. There's no forcing this time, no overboiling, no tightening of the jaw. And when it's complete, the rug glows like a secret sunrise. He rolls it gently, wraps it in linen, places it into a satchel. The journey takes 3 days by foot and donkey. The road curls through salt plains and dusty hills, across places where the sky feels too big and the silence too close. At night, he sleeps beneath stars that seem closer than breath. And then on the final day, just 2 hours from the monastery, the wind rises. Not a breeze, a wind. The kind that doesn't ask what you're carrying. The kind that tears open your satchel, flips your robe inside out, and lifts the prayer rug high into the air like a surrender flag. Navid runs. He yells. He stumbles across rocks and cactus roots, arms outstretched toward a square of flying color that now dances above the dunes. It tumbles, twists, lands, then disappears over a ridge. When he reaches the crest, panting, skin stung with grit, the rug is gone. Only the wind remains, laughing. Maybe. He searches for hours, but by nightfall, he knows the rug will never return. He sets up camp near an outcropping of stone. No fire, just quiet, just breath. He stares at the stars and feels hollow in the chest, not angry, not even grief-stricken, just emptied. And then something peculiar happens. A memory rises unbidden. The monk, so long ago, kneeling beside the vat. If you mourn every fading, you miss the arising. He closes his eyes and lets the words steep. The rug is gone, but the act of making it remains. The care, the colors, the kneeling, the patience. All of that is still here, woven not into wool, but into him. And suddenly, he smiles. He begins to laugh, not loudly, not bitterly, but the kind of laugh that leaks from the corners of a soul that's finally let go of needing to keep what was never his. Here's something rarely said aloud. In some Sufi-influenced branches of Persian Buddhism, there's an idea that the true rug is never the one that survives time. It's the one woven into the weaver. The practice changes you. The letting go completes it. The next morning, Navid walks the final stretch, empty-handed. At the monastery gates, an old monk greets him. Navid bows, then says quietly, "The rug did not survive the wind." The monk studies him, nods once, then opens the gate anyway. No scolding, no disappointment. "Come inside." The monk says, "Your presence is the offering now." And for the first time, Navid believes it, not as a comfort, as a truth. You lie there now, perhaps feeling the winds in your own life, the things that blew away before you could protect them, the projects, the people, the plans. And you begin to wonder, what if the point wasn't to keep them? What if the beauty was in the weaving, not the keeping, not the proof? Just the quiet labor of loving something that might never stay. Navid never remakes the prayer rug. Back in Isfahan, after the desert dust has been rinsed from his sandals and the silence of the monastery still echoes behind his ribs, he returns to the dye shop, not with loss, but with something softer, something that moves like wind through open lattice. He doesn't speak much about what happened. The others ask, of course, but he answers gently. The wind accepted my offering, and somehow that is enough. Seasons shift. The dye shop breathes in rhythms now, cool mornings of soaking fiber, warm afternoons of stirring, slow evenings of watching the colors deepen in twilight. The apprentices begin to notice things they didn't before, the way certain dyes pulse with scent just before boiling. the sound silk makes when it slides through walnut dye, the way pigment settles into the thread differently when your breath is steady. One boy asks him, one rainy evening, "Is it true that every color has a soul?" Navid smiles, "No, but it might be truer to say every soul has a color. The master never returns. And in his place, something else arises, not a replacement, not a title, just a presence that begins to shape the space without announcement. Navid becomes the one they look to when a die doesn't take, when a thread breaks, when a mistake blooms too wide to ignore. But he doesn't correct. He invites, "What is this teaching you?" He often asks, kneeling beside the confused or frustrated. And they answer sometimes with silence, sometimes with tears, sometimes with awe. One day, someone hangs the unfinished carpet, the one Fatme abandoned, all the way back in part 2 on the main wall. No one says why. It just appears there, sunlight pooling across the asymmetry like a benediction. It no longer looks broken. It looks wise. And as Navid passes it each day, he bows just slightly. Because now, he understands what it tried to become all along. Then one evening, years after the monk first appeared, Navid finds himself alone in the courtyard after everyone is gone. A breeze brushes his cheek. The dye vats are quiet. And there, by the edge of the garden wall, something catches his eye. Not a person. A single square of fabric, soft, sun-bleached, fraying at the edge, tucked between two stones. He picks it up. It's familiar. Not the whole rug, just a scrap. Rose, indigo, gold, the colors of dawn. He holds it in his hands and smiles, not because it's returned, but because it doesn't need to be whole to be complete. Sometimes, the Dharma leaves pieces behind, like breadcrumbs, like a final echo that doesn't call you back, but gently thanks you for listening. And now, dear listener, let's slow everything down, because your body knows when the story is near its end. Your shoulders are softer now. Your thoughts have loosened. Even your heartbeat has probably found a more patient rhythm. The colors of Navid's journey are still with you, madder root and walnut husk, crushed petals, pomegranate skin, wind, silence, moonlight. They run together now, not to blur, but to blend. You might be lying on your side, eyes half closed, or you may still be watching the images in your mind as if they were unfolding right in front of you, thread by thread, breath by breath. And here is the final whisper. Nothing you love will stay exactly as it is, but everything you've loved has already become part of you. You carry the dye. You carry the design. You carry the rug, even if the wind has taken it. And in that realization, there is no loss, only change, only deeper color. So now, let your thoughts soften, like the lines of a faded rug in the half-light. Let go of trying to remember the details. They've already done their work. You don't need to hold them tightly anymore. Like the dye that slipped from Navid's fingers into still water. Allow your breath to settle. Let it swirl once, twice, and then still. Each breath in is like dipping wool into a vat, warm, conscious, present. Each breath out, the lifting, the release. There is nothing more to fix, no color to preserve, only this quiet, right here. Remember the empty jar the master left, the silence it held. You carry a jar like that, too. It's there when you don't fill the silence with worry. When you stop chasing what was never meant to stay. When you sit with the fading light and simply say, "This, too, is enough." And maybe tonight, as you drift even deeper into stillness, you'll dream of that carpet shop, of warm dye vats steaming in the morning sun, of hands stained with effort, of mistakes turned into masterpieces, of a boy who learned not from perfection, but from letting go. You are that boy, that weaver, that watcher of threads. You are every color, every fade, every silence. You are not broken. You are beautifully woven by causes and conditions so complex, so unknowable, that no mistake could ever truly ruin the pattern, only add to it. So tonight, let the wind come. Let the dye run. Let the rug be carried away. And trust that what remains is more than enough. Sweet dreams.